I think a lot of us accidentally tie our entire self-worth into our career or our job or what we think we're supposed to be doing with our lives. But what happens when you realize that your purpose isn't your career? Welcome back to Find Your Power podcast. I am your host, Avery Jane. And in today's episode, I want to talk about purpose outside of career, hobbies, and how doing things that make your inner child happy can actually boost your self esteem more than you realize. And before we really dive into today's episode, if you are watching the video version of the podcast, you will notice I am in a different studio than usual. I'm currently on my spring break, so I am in a different setting right now, and I am not home where I normally am. Welcome to the temporary studio for this week. I also want to go ahead and remind everybody that's listening to please follow the podcast wherever you do listen. It really helps the podcast grow, and it also notifies you whenever I come out with a new episode. So if you enjoy the podcast and you are a loyal listener of Find Your Power, please go ahead and do that. And if you listen on the YouTube channel, you can also hit the bell notification there and subscribe, and that way you will get notified with each new episode that I release. So now to the good stuff. I want to first start by talking about how we tie our self-worth into our careers and how this can evidently be pretty problematic. And it's not something that's our fault. I think it's the fact that society kind of has us do this, whether we realize it or not, because think about it. Whenever you meet someone for the first time, you're talking about yourselves, and one of the first things you're going to ask them is probably, "So what do you do?" Or, "So what's your job? What's your career?" And that's one of the first things we know about someone, and that becomes who they are to an extent, especially in the US, I think. And I think reframing that question can be really beneficial. And this is something that I talked with someone about yesterday as well. And a lot of the points I'm going to make in this episode also come from that conversation as well, partly inspired by the conversation, but also what partly inspired this episode is the moment of my life that I'm currently going through right now, kind of finding these hobbies and fulfillments outside of career fulfillment. Anyways, I think that we generally push as a society career equals identity, and this can be a little bit toxic, and not in a way that we intend it to be, but it can lead to that, because what happens if someone's career starts to fall apart? Well, in a lot of cases, they may feel that their whole identity and the whole person that they are is also starting to fall apart. And there are so many other things that make this person who they are, so many other aspects, whether that's family, whether that's friends, whether that's other hobbies outside of what they do for work. So I think that coming to this realization that your career doesn't have to equal your identity is something very powerful to kind of realize and come to the conclusion of in your 20s or earlier rather than later. So starting to have this realization, we do need to talk about why this kind of is, like why we think this way. I think a big reason for this could be because we have this pressure to be productive all the time. And that means that doing things just for fun, quote unquote, are not really in the realm of something that we are able to spend our time on, because it doesn't really count as being productive. And I definitely think that this mindset changes, especially as one gets older. But when we're young, when we are in our 20s, in our 30s, even maybe teenagers, we feel we need to be productive a lot of the times, because that's what society tells us, and we need to spend our time wisely, being productive. We need to take all the opportunities that are handed to us that we that can help us get ahead of others or get ahead of the system and all of these other things that we hear all the time. But the truth is that what we truly want, and this is getting deep, I know, but what we truly want as people is to feel fulfillment, right? To feel happy, to feel fulfilled. That's a lot of our main goals in life, our main purpose in life, whether we realize it or not. But we can't always feel that way if we give up parts of ourselves or we're not expressing every piece of ourselves. And I talk about this a little bit in the episode about what our non negotiables are in regards to starting a new career, the one titled Tattoos and Digital Footprint. Because that one also, I talk a little bit about what we're willing to give up to go into a career, the parts of ourselves that we're willing to give up to go into our future career and our future job. But it's a little bit similar to that in the way, except for rather than just externally, like our body art, as you may call it, we are also talking in this episode about the things that you don't want to give up emotionally as well, and like parts of you in aspects of activities that you like to do, not just things externally. But because we feel this pressure to always be productive, we might have a feeling of almost guilt when we do things just for fun. And like I said, that leads us to not feel like we have time for doing fun things because we only have time for work or things that are productive. I think society a lot of times teaches us or shows us that if we're not doing something that makes us money in the long run, we're wasting our time. Or if we're not doing something that could potentially move our career path forward, we are wasting our time. But having this mindset honestly can disconnect you as a person and all of us as a person to what makes us feel most alive in this world and what makes us feel most present. Now, not only do these things make you who you are, but honestly, having hobbies and some purposes outside of career can really help you boost your self esteem. And I know this is something that we're all always looking to do for the most part. I think all of us could use a little bit of boost in our self esteem every once in a while. And this may seem like a kind of silly solution to that, but I think it really truly works. To start, doing things outside of work, having little hobbies, they can give you the kind of feeling of accomplishment and small wins, as you may say, more than your job can. In a lot of cases, your job is going to be more long term. Maybe you work for a company with a 5 to 10 year project, or maybe if you're in school, you are working towards good grades for your 4 year degree, or maybe just even a whole semester. Well, little having hobbies, you may be able to just work on one little project. Maybe it's a little drawing that you're going to do that just makes you feel some sort of peace and comfort when you're drawing. By the time you finish that drawing, maybe it only takes a week or two. And then you're going to feel that nice little accomplishment, that nice little win of finishing and completing that artwork. Whereas things like grades, things like work, these are going to be more long term. And honestly, sometimes, delayed gratification is a great quality for all of us to have and work on, of course. But we could all benefit from those little wins every once in a while that we don't have to wait so long for, Having those little wins that maybe it only takes a week or two to see the final product. Having these activities or fun things that you do outside of work as well can also kind of help you reconnect with little joys in your life rather than always having the mindset that you need to be productive. And like I said, this is something that society makes a lot of us feel like and a lot of us think. And at all age groups, I think this is a pretty big expectation for society and whatnot to have on us to constantly be productive. But like I said, the reality of the situation is that you're going to lose parts of yourself if you're just constantly striving to be productive and you're not giving other parts of yourself any time or effort. And I think the biggest aspect of your life that these having these hobbies or these activities that you do outside of work that fulfill you, I think the biggest thing that these can do for you when it comes to self esteem is giving you more towards your identity. And this is a subject that I definitely am going to do another whole episode on because there's so much to dive into when it comes to identity and how we see ourselves and others. But in short, I'm just going to say now, for now, that when we have a rocky identity of ourselves, that is a really big cause for low self esteem. And when we have a more sure identity of ourselves, our values, our morals, our expectations for ourselves and others, when we have this very sure foundation of what our lives should look like, and we follow that, then our self esteem is going to be the highest. And it really helps in having activities outside of work in this way because having one job or career path as your entire identity can get really kind of messy sometimes and a little bit unstable. If something starts to fall apart in your job, things are going to maybe fall apart a little bit more in your life if that's the only thing that you tie to your identity and who you are as a person. And the conversation that I was having yesterday with someone about this as well, she actually brought up an amazing point when it comes to identity that I wanted to include in this episode. And I'll probably, like I said, bring it back up when we talk specifically about identity in more detail. But this point that she made was that your life and each person's life is like a pie chart. And within that pie chart, you can give each part of it, each aspect of your life, different percentages almost, which can relate to the time that you give or the effort that you give to those different things in your life. You have the option. You are the one who gets to decide what you put in that pie chart, what you include. You don't have to have 100% of your life as your job. And this pie chart can be your identity or your life or whatever you want for it. But you also have the choice to adjust different pieces of that pie chart to fit who you are and the things that you value in your life. If you have a piece of that pie, a piece of that chart that goes to this one specific hobby in your life, and you have just as much that goes to work, or maybe a little bit more, then that's going to spread out the values in your life that you have. Nobody can tell you how much of your life you need to give to a certain part of that pie or a certain part of that chart. So, of course, we all know that hobbies are a little bit harder to have nowadays when we have so many different forms of entertainment right at our fingertips where we don't even need to step outside the door to access. And that's another reason why I wanted to talk about this topic because I'm afraid that our generation, there's a chance we are losing hobbies. We are losing the pieces of ourselves that like to have fun. I don't know if this is true factual data and whatnot, but from my perspective, I see that the newer generations, at least, are slowly losing their ability to play, ability to have fun with others. And I think that's something that as we as a society and our generation as well are going to slowly realize that we need to get back to. It's already happening, I think. We're starting to realize how much we're on our phones and how much we're using digital entertainment as the way that we primarily spend our free time. And I think that's something that we're slowly going to change because we know that that's not great. But it is something to consider if you find yourself doom scrolling more than you're actually creating, whether that's online content or maybe you're just creating physical things like art pieces, sculptures, drawings, whatever you might be creating, whoever you are, whatever you might be interested in. And of course, we also get this dopamine from doom scrolling and social media in general. So, a lot of the times it makes us feel like we don't really need to do other things outside of digital media because we're already getting that kind of feeling. But but I truly think that doing activities outside of online activities can give you a much deeper feeling of fulfillment and purpose than just spending your time receiving, taking in digital content and entertainment. So I think a lot of people, like a lot of us, honestly, we say we don't have enough time to do hobbies. We don't have enough time in our day for hobbies, right? But if you think about your day, if you really go about breaking up your day and seeing the time that you spend every single minute on everything, obviously that's a lot of work, but it's an idea. If you want to do that, it's not the worst idea to look into, or even just looking back at your day and thinking, what did I get done? What did I do today? Yes, what did I get done that was productive, but also what did I just do in my downtime? And we might find that we're spending 2 to 3 hours a day on our phones or watching TV or taking in any other type of digital entertainment or content. I think if we find that's the case, we could really consider just taking maybe 30 minutes of that time to do something that would fulfill you a little bit more and maybe give your creative brain a little bit of a chance to show itself and create something. Whether that's online or in person, I think giving yourself a chance to create online is also a way to be creative, and it could, to an extent, become a hobby as well. I mean, I kind of consider me making this podcast a sort of a hobby as well because I am taking the time to kind of be creative in a way when writing the scripts and outlines and when recording and editing. And if for you being creative looks like creating online, that's definitely a way to express your creativity and also find another hobby. Another great point in the conversation I had yesterday was this person brought up micro moments. This was a term that I actually hadn't heard of before, but it's pretty self explanatory. She could probably explain it better than me, but generally, it's moments that you take throughout the day, maybe in between work, in between studying, in between classes, whatever your situation might be like. And these are very small moments, as you can kind of tell from the name. So maybe this is only 3 minutes, but it could also be like 20 minutes, depending on how much time you have. So it's very personalized, but these are moments that you can fit in whenever you can. They are a moment where you do something that is helping to ground you, but also bring you back to the present and also just make you feel alive in a way, which can in turn help lift your mood as well. The reason that I'm bringing this up as well is because I think that right now for our generation, the way that we do this is by going on our phone. If we get tired of what we're doing, maybe that's studying or working, especially like at a desk and whatnot, we usually pick up our phone to take a break. But the truth is that I think a lot of times that's actually more distracting and makes it even harder to return to what we're doing in work or in studying or in paying attention because of how much fast content and dopamine you're going to get from your phone. It kind of makes your brain a little bit like impatient. So I've noticed that about myself. Whenever I use my breaks or as you may call micro moments to do something else that's not looking at my phone or my laptop, I actually find it easier to go back to what I was doing before, whether that be studying or working. So some of these little moments might be just taking like a 5-minute walk outside or maybe even just stepping outside if you only have like 2 or 3 minutes. Just stepping outside, feeling the sun on your face, feeling how the weather is. If it's cold that day, maybe you just get a little bit chilly for a few minutes and then you go back inside to warm up. But feeling that fresh air, taking in that fresh air and feeling the warmth or the cold of the weather that day, it can really like wake you up and make you feel alive for a second and take your mind off of work or off of studying just for a few minutes to give your brain that little bit of a rest and a break. And even if you only have like 30 seconds to 1 minute, I think that even just standing up from where you are at your desk or whatever and stretching. I mean, maybe this isn't such a realistic thing to do like in the middle of a lecture class. Although I have seen it before. You wouldn't be the only one ever to do it, but I know that might not be quite as realistic. So maybe that's just if you're at home working or at work, maybe. But whatever you can kind of do to just move your body a little bit, I think that that is the biggest thing. Because whenever we take our breaks by looking at our phone, most of the time I would assume we're really just sitting down. I notice that if I'm on my laptop studying for like an hour or two, and then I need a break, if I just pick up my phone, I'm still sitting. I'm not moving my body any more than I was for those past 2 hours. So by standing up and stretching, at least you're getting some blood flow. At least then your brain is getting a little bit more woken up, and it will be a little bit easier to get back to what you were doing before with more productivity. And also for me, my little micro moment that I noticed that I kind of unintentionally did this as a micro moment, but it's something that I started doing because it brings me a little bit of joy and a little bit of a mental break that's not going on my phone is when I'm at home and I need a break from my laptop. I will stand up and I will go find my cat somewhere. I will go find my kitty and I will cuddle with him for a few minutes, pet him, hear his purrs. And honestly, it just takes my mind off what I was studying for a few minutes. And I think it's honestly better for me than going on my phone. So even if it's something as simple as that, I think having these little micro moments, even though they're not complete new hobbies, I wouldn't say, but having these little moments in between your work can be really beneficial to your mind and your productivity. And also just trying this out as a way to not pick up your phone. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about my own personal hobbies that I've been having recently, or even what I've always done. But what I'm trying to keep doing, even as I get older and start finding my future career, I think it's important to keep the hobbies that you had as a kid if you still enjoy them. Even though of course my schedule and my time is looking differently organized, especially as when I was a kid, now that I'm having slowly more responsibilities and whatnot, I still find joy in some of the things that I used to do as a kid. And I think it's important to continue those things. So for me, some of the creative hobbies that I have, like I said, making this podcast, that's a new one. Obviously, I didn't have this podcast when I was a kid, but it is something that I think is a little bit of a creative outlet of mine. Also, I've mentioned so many times, but doing my nails, that's a little creative outlet of mine that I have been doing for quite a while. When I was a kid, I even painted my nails. So doing things like that. I also enjoy coloring, those like adult coloring books where you can get like colored pencils or even like the thin Sharpies. Doing those while even doing something related to schoolwork, whether that's watching a lecture or some other YouTube video that might be helping me study and whatnot. Doing those at the same time can honestly give me a little sense of peace and calming a little bit more. I think there actually probably is scientific research done on the fact that coloring can calm your nervous system down a little bit. So that's a good one, especially when you are a little bit stressed. It works for me, so maybe it'll work for you. I've also done quite a lot of painting in my life. I started that up during COVID, and that's something that I still very occasionally will do as well. It takes a little bit more time, I would say, than the other ones, and I actually have a few paintings in some of my podcast videos as well sometimes. So you might be able to see them there. I think the biggest one that I wanted to talk about today is also softball. When I was about 7 years old, I started playing softball, and it's something that I stopped for a few years when I started college because honestly, I wasn't really sure if I still enjoyed it. But honestly, this school year, so August 2025, I started playing again with just the club team at my school, and it's something that I've really enjoyed. And this kind of leads me into my next part of this episode that I wanted to talk about feeding your inner child. And that's because this kind of sport is something that I've noticed has done that for me. And I think it's very important and very beneficial for people to kind of find those little things in their life that could be considered to feed their inner child. You guys have probably heard that term before. If not, what I basically mean by that is kind of just doing things that make you happy, and maybe you did them when you were a kid, maybe you didn't. You don't have to have done these things when you were actually a kid, but it's kind of the things that most of the time you did do when you were a child, or maybe you wanted to do when you were a child and you couldn't. So now you do them when you're older and you maybe have the money to do it or the time or whatnot. And these are things that I think you're mainly doing for the purpose that it is enjoyable for you. And there's not really any big thing that you're getting out of it other than enjoyment. Maybe you're building connections with other people through doing this activity, but you don't have to be. It's really just activities that you do for the sole purpose of feeding your soul, and that's why it's feeding your inner child. So finding those things in your life, like I recently did. So finding those little things in your life that kind of help feed your inner child are probably going to be the best, or I think going to be the best hobbies that you can pick from, because those are things that you're doing for the sole purpose of just enjoyment, and they're really not for any reason other than that. You're not trying to be impressive doing it. You're not trying to be productive. You're really doing it for the sole purpose of enjoyment and feeding your soul and who you are. And that can also be tied into who you are as a person, including your identity as well. So it all comes back full circle. And it can be part of your pie chart. So as we start to wrap up this episode, I do want to remind you guys that your purpose isn't only found in your career, it's also found in the moments where you feel most like yourself. So if there's anything that's been in the back of your mind recently that you've been really wanting to try at again, maybe that's painting, some kind of sport, maybe it's coloring, maybe it's skateboarding, maybe it's working with clay, sculpting. I heard that's a very, very beneficial one when it comes to hobbies, because you're working a lot of senses in that hobby. Your visual, your hands, you're feeling the clay, but also sometimes auditory as well. You can hear the clay and how it kind of forms and works. So anyways, little side note with that one. That's something that I heard recently. But if you have any of those little things that you have in the back of your mind, thinking about starting again, I really want to encourage you guys to start doing something. Start something on the side. And it could be anything. Maybe that's even like yoga or journaling, anything. It can be anything. It's completely up to you. And it's whatever makes you feel more like you. Your life is allowed to be bigger than your job title. That concludes today's episode of Find Your Power podcast. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and listening. Tune in every Thursday to listen or watch on YouTube, Spotify, and audio only on Amazon Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and Audible. Make sure to check out the Instagram or the TikTok at findyourpower_podcast. I appreciate you all for being here today and supporting me. If you enjoyed, please rate the podcast 5 stars wherever you listen. Like I mentioned before, subscribe to the YouTube channel if you listen through there. Leave any comments or reviews. I read them all. I appreciate them all. Constructive criticism is welcomed, but please be nice. If you know somebody in your life that could benefit from this episode, maybe it's someone that recently mentioned to you that they want to start a new hobby and whatnot, please send this to them. It really could help them out. Or send them the whole podcast if you think they could benefit from that. They may thank you later for it as well. And lastly, if you'd like to be featured for an interview or a conversation on the podcast, please send me an email at the email linked in the podcast description section. I'm completely welcome to anybody who wants to be on the podcast, and we can make it work. I will talk to you guys again soon, and don't forget, we will find your power.